Well, we've looked during this hour at water as our lifeblood, and we all learned as kids that the water cycle occurs when there's evaporation off the oceans and it falls as rain or snow, and then it rushes back to the ocean and the streams and rivers. We've looked at this in the context of South America and Central America, and of course we heard about the terrible tragedy at Teresópolis in Brazil a couple of years ago. And even though a lot of people lost their lives and it left an indelible memory, it is one of many events. This was another one this year in Brazil and all across South America and in Central America. These events have been happening. 21.5 centimeters falling in a very short period of time here in Sao Paulo. Throughout the last several years, many areas of Brazil and South America have been hit, causing a lot of refugees. This event just a couple of years ago caused 400,000 Brazilians to be homeless as a result of the flooding. The immensely respected former president of Brazil, President Lula da Silva, spoke for many leaders when he noted that it's raining in areas, it's raining too much in areas where it's not known to rain, and we have drought in areas where they don't normally experience drought. Well, this is continuing to happen this year in Argentina. 30 centimeters or 12 inches of rain in just a few hours, the largest downpour they've ever had in that area. A couple of years ago, infrastructure damage in Argentina. This year in Peru, a similar event caused massive damage. In Costa Rica, over the last several years, massive rainfall, all in a short period of time. Mudslides killing a lot of people. Also in Guatemala, the Pan American Highway was severed in El Salvador. In Colombia, just a few years ago, 2 million people were rendered homeless because of a massive series of downpours and the resulting flooding in Colombia. This was an enormously tragic and expensive event. In one of these mudslides, 119 people were killed. We also heard during this hour about the impact of melting glaciers. Nowhere in the world do you have the kind of dependence on glacial meltwater for drinking water and agriculture that you do in the Andes. And the scientists have monitored all of these glaciers throughout the Andes, and you can see what's been happening. All of them have been melting at an incredibly rapid rate. We heard from people in a rural village in Bolivia. The capital, La Paz, depends upon water from the glaciers on that mountain in the distance. And when the flow increases during the melting, it just is a preview of the drop in supply when the ice is gone. La Paz depends on glaciers for 1/3 of its water. In Peru, 22% of their glaciers have been lost in just the last 30 years. There has been a lot of unrest from people who are concerned about the supply and quality of drinking water. Some of the political leaders have felt such pressure, they actually began to whitewash the rocks in the Andes to try to desperately reflect some of the incoming solar energy and slow down the melting. The way to do it, of course, is to stop putting all the global warming pollution up there. But you see in Peru how the scientists have measured these before and after pictures, the disappearance of the glaciers. And one of the largest in South America, near the southern tip in Argentina, this glacier has disappeared almost entirely over the last many decades. Now, going to the far north end of South America and into the Caribbean, we also heard about coral bleaching. Here is in Jamaica, a precise area where they made the observations, and then 40 years later, the corals are all gone. These corals bleach, as we heard in the scientific presentation this hour, when the algae in their skin is driven away by the excessive heat. They become vulnerable to disease, and repeated events cause the death of the coral. Also true, by the way, in the Florida Keys, where you see a 40-year time lapse in this image. And of course, the water cycle is continuing to cause these destructive droughts, imposing another cost of carbon. This is a dry riverbed in Bahia in Brazil. Over the last several years, we've seen damage to livestock and crops as a result of these repeated deep and severe droughts. This is having a huge impact on farmers. This is a statement from a Peruvian farmer who says the climate changes every year. Some years we have great droughts and others too much rain or ice. And we have more illnesses with the plants. Just as the corals become more vulnerable to illnesses, the agricultural crops do as well. The riverbeds in some years have been drying up. And of course, when you talk about South America, you cannot fail to discuss the Amazon, one of the great natural wonders of the world. This is a part of the Rio Negro River that helps to form the Amazon. You can see the bridge at Manaus in the background. It almost completely dried up 3 years ago. And that same year, the Amazon lost almost 1 million acres in the historic drought of 2010. It's the second record drought in just 5 years. And we've seen the impact on agricultural income, another cost of carbon. In Colombia, the coffee production down by 1/4. The floods and mudslides, the melting glaciers, the dying coral drought, wildfires, all of these devastating events lead up to a very heavy cost of carbon. And that's why we need to put a price on carbon in the markets and put a price on denial in the political system. Now, luckily, South America, as with many other parts of the world, is moving forward with wind energy and solar energy in Chile and Argentina and all around the continent, Uruguay, in Brazil. This particular park will supply non-carbon energy to 200,000 people. We're seeing a lot of progress also on biomass. In Brazil, for example, where there are plentiful supplies of sun and fresh water, the economics of biomass are much more attractive than they are in many other parts of the world. We're seeing in preparation for the World Cup, the installation of solar panels in sports venues. We're also seeing solar energy in Bolivia, solar cookers in Argentina, even high in the Altiplano and Lake Titicaca in Peru, photovoltaic energy in Central America, in Costa Rica. And what we're seeing now is a surge in global investment in renewable energy. For the first time in history, 3 years ago, the total investments in renewable energy exceeded those in fossil fuels. The shale gas surge has changed that the last couple of years, but now we're seeing a resurgence of this new phenomena. It's taking off. And look at this image here. This is, as of 2013, marked in green, all of the countries where solar electricity is available at equal to or cheaper than the price of electricity from other sources. And now look what happens in the next 6 to 7 years. All of these other countries become areas where the cost of electricity from solar and wind, this measuring solar, is equal to or less than the cost of electricity from coal and oil and other fossil fuels. Now, this is enormously significant because it means that in less than 7 years, more than 85% of all the people in the world will live in areas where the cost of solar electricity is equal to or less than the price of electricity from other sources. That's a big deal. You know, the difference between 32 degrees and 33 degrees, or in Celsius 0 and 1 degree, is more than a difference of 1 degree. It's the difference between ice and water. And when renewable electricity becomes cheaper than the price of electricity from coal, that's a huge difference. And it's why we need to put a price on carbon and put a price on denial in our politics. We have the opportunity and we have the technologies to move forward to save the future of our planet. Put a price on carbon. put a price on denial. And, by the way, stay tuned for the next hour when we'll talk about Europe.